I'll be reading from the Wednesday, May 27th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The top headline on today's Wall Street Journal front page reads, Iran seeks deal to ease pain in economy, deny Trump a win. Twin imperatives appear to keep talks with U.S. alive after overnight skirmishes. Iran is pursuing two intertwining goals in its negotiating strategy with the U.S., Iranian officials and Arab mediators say. Secure financial relief for an economy that is under severe strain without giving enough ground on its nuclear program to allow President Trump to claim victory. Iran mostly shook off an overnight skirmish with U.S. forces in which several Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fighters were killed, staying at the negotiating table on Tuesday. Tehran has been seeking economic relief by regaining control of some of the $100 billion in assets frozen by the West and regaining access to world oil markets, these officials said. Late Monday, U.S. Central Command struck Iranian speedboats it said were laying out mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran retaliated by firing on U.S. planes, and the U.S. hit back at missile launch sites in Iran. The exchange of fire followed mixed signals from Trump over the weekend. After saying on Saturday that a deal with Tehran was largely negotiated, the president appeared to change course amid criticism of the outline of the deal from some Senate Republicans. Iran signaled that strikes wouldn't derail negotiations. Tehran's top negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, remained in Qatar on Tuesday for talks after arriving a day early. The officials said Iran delayed announcing the IRGC deaths to keep the talks on track. Ghalibaf had arrived in the Persian Gulf country a day earlier to address sticking points, including the frozen Iranian funds and details about reopening the strait, the officials said. Ghalibaf returned to Tehran later Tuesday after consultations with Qatari officials, Iranian state broadcaster IRIB reported. Iran's resistance to dismantling its nuclear program has been one of the central points of contention in talks. Trump, a Republican, spent the weekend touting advancements in negotiations while the U.S. and Iran remain far apart on the key issues. He appeared to walk back his demand that Iran hand over remaining enriched uranium to the U.S., saying he preferred Iran destroy or hand over the nuclear material to another country. Some U.S. officials said Trump was responding in real time to talks and proposals passed back and forth to demonstrate progress amid Republican criticism of the diplomatic efforts. In a further sign that Iran wants to keep talking, its president, Masoud Pezeshkian, discussed efforts to reach a memorandum of understanding between Tehran and Washington in a phone call on Tuesday with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt, one of the mediating countries. Mediators expressed concern that hardline elements inside Iran are trying to sabotage any peace agreement by carrying out covert operations against maritime traffic. 3 Revolutionary Guard boats were seen in the southern part of the strait on Tuesday, according to satellite imaging analyzed by maritime artificial intelligence company Windward. A tanker was hit by an explosion in the Gulf of Oman on Tuesday, according to the Royal Navy-affiliated UK maritime trade operations, in an area where Iran has frequently attacked commercial ships. Iran said on Tuesday it would retaliate for the U.S. strike, which it called a violation of the ceasefire. Iranian regime hardliners also reiterated their criticism of diplomacy. Masheed Mousavi, the Revolutionary Guard commander in charge of Iran's drone and missile program, said the negotiation with the enemy is pure loss. However, Iranian government spokeswoman Fatima Mohajirani on Tuesday signaled diplomacy would likely continue, even as she criticized contradictions from the U.S. The combination of Iran's military forces on the ground and Ghalibaf's negotiating role will benefit the Iranian people, she told a news conference in response to a question on the attacks. Mediators, including Pakistan, Qatar, and Egypt, are working to help both sides bridge gaps in their positions. A crucial point at issue during Ghalibaf's visit to Qatar was the release of $24 billion, a quarter of the Iranian funds frozen abroad. Officials from Iran and mediating countries said. Iran is nearing a compromise to get half of that money released at an early stage, they said. The war and U.S. blockade have added to the pressure to what was already a spiraling economic crisis in Iran. Strikes on its energy infrastructure had led to rationing of motor fuel. Deteriorating living standards and rampant inflation led to nationwide protests that shook the Islamic Republic in January. More pragmatic members of the regime have been pushing to get this relief through a deal before the economic problems descend into new rounds of demonstrations. On the U.S. side, there were signs that Trump might be taking some of the criticism from GOP senators to heart and searching for ways to improve the terms of any deal over the weekend. Trump later said he wanted Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan to sign on to the Abraham Accords, establishing or expanding diplomatic relations with Israel. He suggested Iran could join as well once Tehran signed a peace deal. Trump had spoken to aides and outside advisors about the concept of expanding the scope of the 2020 Accords in the hours before the regional call, and told aides he planned to raise the point with his counterparts, U.S. officials said. But Middle Eastern leaders haven't been briefed in that way before the call, leaving them surprised when Trump raised it, the officials said. A senior White House official said the president, rather than an advisor, came up with the idea. By raising the accords in the same breath as the deal to end the war, Trump changed not only the trajectory of the continuing peace talks, but also the U.S. relationship with Middle Eastern countries, where, after years of regional war, skepticism of normalizing ties with Israel runs high. Trump's new initiative has received praise from his political allies, but private pushback from Qatar and Riyadh. Progress has been made on the future status of highly enriched uranium stockpiles, which the U.S. fears could be used to build a nuclear weapon, the mediator said. Trump, late Monday, backed down from a previous demand that the stockpiles be handed over directly to the U.S. That would bring the U.S. position closer to that of Iran, which has agreed to dilute its stockpiles to low enrichment levels and has expressed openness to transfer them to Russia. The next headline on today's front page reads, Bullying Claims Spur BP to Oust Chairman. Manifold is accused of abusive behavior and mishandling company information. By Matthew Dalton, Adam Whitaker, and Ben Dummett. BP removed its chairman, Albert Manifold, after the oil company's board was told that he was verbally abusive and bullying toward employees, and had mishandled company information, according to people familiar with the matter. The London-based company said on Tuesday that its board had unanimously decided that Manifold should no longer serve as chair, and that he would depart immediately. Quote, the board has been surprised and disappointed to learn of governance oversight and conduct issues it deems unacceptable and has taken decisive action, said Amanda Blanc, the company's senior independent director. Concerns about Manifold's abusive behavior relate to conduct toward both junior and senior employees, the people familiar with the matter said. In addition, the board believed that Manifold shared privileged information with people who weren't supposed to have it, and withheld information from the board, one of the people said. Manifold didn't respond to a request for comment. BP shares dropped 4% in London on Tuesday. The company's U.S.-listed shares declined 3.8%. Manifold's abrupt departure adds to the leadership turmoil in recent years that has hamstrung BP, a storied yet often troubled energy producer. The company has now had 3 chief executives and 3 chairmen since 2023. Numerous executives and other board directors have also left the business as it executes a major strategic shift to boost oil and gas production after an ill-timed turn toward renewable energy. BP named Manifold as its chairman last July, tapping an energy industry outsider to oversee the company's new strategy. The Irish executive was previously chief executive of Dublin-based CRH, one of the world's largest building material suppliers, where he led an overhaul of its portfolio. Manifold's appointment was intended to give BP a clean break from its past leadership, which embarked on the now-abandoned pivot toward green energy. A number of executives and board members left in the months after his arrival. In an early message to the staff, Manifold said BP needed to act with urgency to simplify what he described as an overly complex business. The company would have to make tough decisions, and some of its assets might be more valuable to others, he said. Manifold also oversaw the appointment of a new chief executive, Meg O'Neill, who took the helm in April. In O'Neill, BP chose a veteran oil and gas executive with decades of experience at ExxonMobil, and more recently at the head of Australian energy producer Woodside Energy. The new leadership team signaled it would continue BP's return to its fossil fuel roots, away from clean energy investments that couldn't match the returns of oil and gas. Before Tuesday's disclosure, BP's shares were riding the wave of higher energy prices sparked by the Iran war and had outperformed other major oil companies. The company is ideally positioned to benefit because it doesn't produce much around the Persian Gulf, unlike rivals such as Shell and Exxon. The company recently reported a doubling in first quarter profit, and its stock is up about 20%, even accounting for Tuesday's fall. Now, the company is thrust back into a fresh period of upheaval. Here we go again, analysts at Barclays wrote in a note about Manifold's departure. We think serious questions do need to be asked about the wider board's decision-making process, they said, adding that the situation appears to be another misstep in terms of appointments. Manifold's ouster is the latest abrupt management change at BP. Former CEO Bernard Looney resigned in September 2023 over past relationships with colleagues. The company said at the time that Looney hadn't been fully transparent about the relationships. The job of overseeing BP's board now falls to Ian Tyler, an existing director who will take over from Manifold as chairman on an interim basis. BP has often encountered trouble since its 1998 merger with Amoco, with management in London sometimes criticized for weak oversight of the company's sprawling global operations. Aside from turmoil in the executive ranks, there have been operational disasters. In 2005, a Texas City, Texas refinery exploding, killing 15 people in one of the worst industrial accidents in U.S. history. 5 years later, an explosion at BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico led to the largest offshore oil spill in U.S. history. The next headline on today's front page reads, Fears grow, Putin will expand war into Europe, by Yaroslav Trofimov. Dateline is Tallinn in Estonia. Russia is stuck on the Ukrainian battlefield and lashing out. Massive strikes on Kyiv. The growing fear in European capitals is that President Vladimir Putin will try to reshuffle the cards by expanding the conflict to Europe. Russia is making increasingly bellicose statements against the Baltic states. It has threatened to bomb decision-making centers in Latvia after accusing the country of hosting Ukrainian drone operators, an allegation Latvia denied. Air raid alarms were sounded in Lithuania last week, forcing the government into a bunker after suspected Russian drones approached its airspace. The Russian Ministry of Defense has also published the addresses of companies allegedly working on drone production with Ukraine in 8 European nations, warning of unpredictable consequences and sharp escalation if military assistance to Kyiv doesn't stop. While fears that Moscow could expand the conflict to Europe aren't new, recent developments have made them more urgent. Several European national security officials have warned that Russia could try to test the cohesion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization by targeting one of the Baltic nations, Swedish and Danish islands in the Baltic Sea or alliance territory in the Arctic. Quote, the security environment in Europe has deteriorated during the last 24 months, and we see a greater inclination from the Russian side to take greater operational risks in their hybrid operations, said Defense Minister Paul Jonsson of Sweden. We need to be focused on strengthening our ability to deter and defend against the Russians. End quote. President Trump's recent threats to withdraw from NATO and his moves to reduce U.S. forces deployed in Europe have undermined this deterrence. Senior European officials said they fear Moscow might see an opening in the next 12 months as the oil shock from the Iran war creates more political turmoil in Europe, buoying far-right parties that seek a return to buying Russian and oil gas and an end to aiding Ukraine. Quote, "We know that Russia's aim is to threaten the whole European security architecture, so there is every reason to be extremely vigilant, to continue the support of Ukraine, and to continue, of course, the efforts toward European rearmament," said Benjamin Haddad, France's Minister for European Affairs. France is set to hold a presidential election next year, with the candidate more friendly to Russia holding strong odds to win. There are no signs of Russia actually moving troops or equipment to stage attacks outside Ukraine in the immediate future, intelligence and military officials in several European nations said. But, they said, Putin will be confronted with a stark choice in the coming months because of a simple arithmetic of attrition. Russian forces are losing nearly 35,000 soldiers a month, according to Western intelligence estimates, more than the Kremlin can recruit. Continuing the war in Ukraine at its current pace will soon become untenable without resorting to forced mobilization, something Russia hasn't done since a one-off drive to draft 300,000 troops in 2022. Such a move would have big implications inside and outside Russia. Quote, "If you just mobilize for this war, then you would send a signal that you are not really winning this war," said Kaja Kallas, the European Union's top official for foreign affairs and security policy. So there comes the point where they need to escalate to justify the mobilization, and that's a very dangerous point. Of course, nobody sees in the head of Putin, but this could be the calculus to move forward and change the linearity of this war." End quote. Russia conducted snap nuclear exercises that included deploying warheads to Belarus this month. Moscow also warned that Kyiv will face a wave of systemic heavy bombardments such as the missile and drone strikes last weekend, urging foreign embassies and citizens to evacuate the capital. Putin insists that victory is in sight. There is no indication that his objective, domination of Ukraine and redrawing the balance of power across Europe, has been scaled back. In Russia's official discourse, relatively conciliatory toward the U.S. since Trump's election, the EU, which now provides most of the support for Ukraine, features as the implacable enemy that must be punished or destroyed. Quote, "Russia clearly sees the European Union as a threat to their system of governance, which is about oppression and fear," said Michael McGrath, the EU Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, and the Rule of Law. "Ultimately, their aim is to destroy the European Union, and we would be under no illusions that because they don't want a large, powerful, and united democratic bloc on their doorstep." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In recent war games, Ukrainian drone teams quickly defeated much larger units of NATO forces. The problem is, Russian troops possess comparable experience and drone equipment and likely would fare much better against European militaries than they do against Ukraine, especially if the U.S. doesn't help. To embark on such an escalation, Russia must replenish its military ranks. Quote, "It would be a risky decision for Putin," said Kaupa Rosen, director of Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service. "Problems inside of Russia are starting to pile up, not succeeding on the battlefield, the finance situation, and the Ukrainian deep strikes that are affecting the economy but also the people." Johnson, the Swedish defense minister, said attacking NATO would be a mistake. "We're very determined to keep every inch of Allied territory safe." Norbert Röttgen, a senior German lawmaker, said Putin is known for taking big gambles. "Despite my doubts, we also have to calculate that Putin behaves irrationally and in an escalatory way," he said. The next headline on today's front page reads, "Will people live in America's emptiest downtown?" Asher Luzzatto has targeted Denver for a radical experiment in converting vacant commercial space into residential units. By Peter Grant. Dateline is Denver. Developer Asher Luzzatto stared out at the snow-capped Rocky Mountains one recent April afternoon, admiring the postcard view from the 29th floor of his recently acquired office tower. Then he turned his gaze to the streets surrounding the downtown Denver building, where he glimpsed a less inspiring sight: vacant storefronts, empty office buildings with darkened floors, and deserted streets. The property, one of the two office towers known as the Energy Center, is a testament to downtown Denver's rapid decline. Luzzatto picked up the 785,000 square foot complex late last year for a little more than $5 million, 97% below what a previous owner paid for it in 2013. America's downtowns are in crisis. Office work has migrated into the suburbs, leaving abandoned buildings and blighted conditions behind. Central business districts from St. Louis to Dallas and Portland, Oregon, are fighting to escape a death spiral. Luzzatto has a plan to fix these downtown catastrophes. He is starting with Denver, where nearly 40% of the office space in the central business district is vacant, the highest among the country's top 50 cities, according to real estate services firm CBRE Group. Cities built forests of skyscrapers when white-collar employment was inseparable from downtowns, and workers poured in daily from bedroom communities. But when remote work became more popular and these downtowns continued to deteriorate, waves of companies moved out jobs, and business districts collapsed. Luzzatto's approach is to turn that old formula inside out, transforming desolate urban cores into welcoming places to live. He plans to convert half of the Energy Center plus two other downtown Denver office buildings into about 1,100 apartments. He's also planning a bookstore, art gallery, children's museum, and daycare center. He acquired all four buildings for pennies on the dollar. In a matter of months, the Los Angeles native has taken control of more than 7% of Denver's traditional downtown office space. Those rock-bottom purchase prices make it economically feasible to convert his mostly empty office towers into residential buildings, he says. He said that his competitors, other bidders for the downtown properties, had a lot of trouble seeing past what is here today. Utopian vision. Luzzatto's utopian vision for reimagining downtown Denver and for providing a template to revitalize America's other broken downtowns faces a number of serious challenges. He has to contend with high construction costs and lenders who are often skeptical of such complex conversion projects. He has to navigate rigid building codes and revise office layouts to work for housing. Perhaps hardest of all, part of his scheme is to convince a number of Denver employees who work outside the city center to move into his transitional downtown neighborhood and endure a reverse commute. But he received a vote of confidence in March when the Downtown Denver Development Authority approved a $63 million loan toward his plans. It was the quasi-government entity's largest loan ever. And Luzzatto insists that there's a market downtown for affordable housing that offers priceless views. Imagine if this was your apartment, he said, motioning to the majestic peaks to the west. Modern U.S. cities developed in the early 20th century around a single organizing principle. White-collar work was concentrated in dense central business districts. Even as residents moved to the suburbs and cities grappled with poverty and crime, that model largely endured, until recently, when technology and shifting living and working patterns threatened many of these districts with obsolescence. Early in the office downturn, starting in 2020, planners and architects cautioned that office to residential conversion would barely make a dent in the housing shortage. They were simply too expensive to undertake. But the rapid plunge in office values, along with the growing willingness of cities to provide subsidies, is changing that equation. Now, developers are moving ahead with plans in New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and other cities to convert these emptying office towers into new residences. The number of office to apartment conversions in the U.S. pipeline at the start of 2026 grew to 90,300 units, a 28% increase from a year earlier, according to apartment search website Rent Cafe. Oil boom. In Denver, plans to create a modern downtown started in the mid-20th century when the city's razed taverns, flop houses, and dilapidated tenements into an urban renewal push. The effort paid off during the oil boom of the 1970s and 1980s. But the Redevelopment wiped out much of Denver's historic fabric, leaving uneven stretches that never developed the dense, mixed-use character needed today for a vibrant downtown. Quote, "The buildings were just commodities," said John Bourge, chief executive partner at Denver developer Urban Villages. "There was never really a dedication to the urban fabric." Even so, between 2010 and 2019, Denver was booming. It was drawing tens of thousands of new residents each year with its outdoor vibe and early legalization of cannabis. The city also reaped the benefits of public investments in the Union Station neighborhood, renovating historic buildings and creating an entertainment district and new housing. Quote, "There was an hour wait for the Chipotle at noon," said Sam Kelly, a 56-year-old state employee outside the office building he works out of 2 days a week. But little was done to address the warning signs that vacancy was creeping up downtown as work habits changed. Then the pandemic hit and Denver offices emptied out. And when companies did bring employees back, demand shifted further away from the sterile downtown core, flowing instead to suburban office hubs or to Denver's newer districts, like the area around Union Station and the River North Arts District. Today, Denver has a remote work rate well above the national average. Kelly, the state employee, says he often bikes on days he works remotely. "That's part of working from home," he said, "plus you avoid 2 hours of traffic a day." Luzzatto, 38 years old, is slight of build and with an urban hipster's wispy beard. He grew up in Santa Monica, California, but recently moved to Taos, New Mexico, where he spends time riding horses and hiking with his family along the Rio Grande. He meditates regularly. Real estate is in his blood. His father started a development firm after running the real estate arm of band leader Lawrence Welk's family office. Dinner table conversations revolved around buildings, neighborhoods, and property deals. Lawrence Welk. The elder Luzzatto was an early believer in what would come to be called creative office space, a precursor to today's office-to-residential conversion movement. He transformed old industrial buildings, like the warehouse tied to the Welk family's record label business, into loft-like offices. When he became a developer, Luzzatto saw repurposing LA's oversupply of office space into housing as key to solving the city's housing shortage. He hatched a radical idea: abolish all zoning and allow strong housing demand to naturally drive empty offices and other idle buildings into apartments. "Let the market figure it out because people are creative and solution-oriented," he said. In 2021, Luzzatto launched a long-shot bid for mayor of Los Angeles, hoping that at least to force his anti-zoning housing plan to the center of the campaign. He withdrew after a few months. He withdrew a few months later after mall developer Rick Caruso entered the race with far greater financial resources. He returned to development intent on putting his housing vision into practice. He chose Denver, favoring a city that has repeatedly reinvented itself and one filled with office towers that had collapsed in value. When Luzzatto arrived in 2024, he expected to encounter buildings in disrepair. Instead, he found many had recently been upgraded, with modern interiors, new fitness centers, and sleek co-working facilities installed by owners, betting that office demand would rebound. Quote, "COVID was followed by the wrong thesis that there's going to be a massive return to work," Luzzatto said. "Everyone spent a bunch of money in 2021 and 2022. End quote. That growth was layered onto old thinking, daily commuters, and modern office districts that left the core overly dependent on daytime workers and thin on housing and neighborhood life. Then remote work took hold, and that model unraveled quickly, emptying buildings and exposing just how fragile the downtown Denver economy had become. Quote, "We had our real heyday and now we're paying for it," said Bill Mosher, a veteran real estate executive tapped by Denver's mayor to help revive the city's struggling downtown core. Luzzatto bought his first 2 Denver buildings a year ago. He plans to use the building's long layouts and large window bays to create 750 units with oversized view of those majestic mountains. 75 of the units will be affordable. Rents of the market rate units will run from about $1,700 for a studio to $4,500 for a three-bedroom. Quote, people are currently renting these 3, 4, 5-story, mid-rise, cheap construction buildings on the side of the highway, he said. They're going to have the ability to pay the same rent and be in the heart of downtown. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Cheap price. Between the first two buildings Luzzatto purchased sits a soaring, glass-topped interior courtyard from the mid-1970s, flooded with natural light and framed by balconies and walkways. He's planning to install a bakery and coffee counter along one wall, a bookstore across from it, and a wine and beer bar spilling into tables that connect to the courtyard in a bodega-style market. He paid $5.25 million for the Energy Center's 2 towers, a cheaper price than what some of the nicer homes sell for in Denver's Cherry Creek. The other 2 Denver office towers that Luzzatto purchased were valued at about $100 million in 2015 when purchased by investment giant Blackstone. Luzzatto paid $3.2 million, much less than what Blackstone spent on upgrades to the building and landscaping in the years following the pandemic. Still, getting people to live downtown won't be easy. While Denver Mayor Mike Johnston, who took office in July 2023, has made progress in reducing crime and homelessness, many who left say they haven't seen enough improvement to return. I have eyes and I can observe, said Kyle Tormelin, 45, who works at a co-working space at the Denver Tech Center, a suburban office hub that competes with downtown. It's just not an attractive place anymore, end quote. The next headline on today's front page of the Wall Street Journal reads, How to Rile Up a Libertarian, Propose a Dress Code. A plan to mandate professional attire at the convention went about as well as you'd expect. By Alexander Nazarian. Live free or die, but would it kill you to wear a tie? That was the essence of Ben Weir's plea ahead of the biennial Libertarian National Convention in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In a May 15th post on X, Weir 36 declared that he had it with the wacky costumes which have long been a staple of political party conventions but seem particularly popular among the do-what-thou-wilt libertarians. No more using a boot for headwear, as one convention mainstay named Vermin Supreme did. No more see-through clothing to promote government transparency. Weir, who was running for Merrimack County Sheriff in New Hampshire and couldn't attend the convention, wrote that he was calling on the party's national committee to establish a baseline professional dress standard for participation in official proceedings. His proposal called for business casual attire, neat facial hair, and closed-toed shoes. Quote, biological males shall not wear dresses, skirts, or attire traditionally recognized as women's wear, Weir wrote in the message, which was also sent to the party's governing board as a proposed policy amendment. Clothes that were overtly theatrical, fetish-oriented, or materially inconsistent wouldn't fly. You hate freedom of speech, my dude, wrote Ray Walden, a libertarian official from Illinois on X. Some called Weir's proposed injunctions anathema to libertarianism, which is, after all, against telling people what to do. Oh, dear God, Matt Welsh, a libertarian who co-hosts the Fifth Column podcast, wrote in a text message, I predict failure, he said, describing party conventions in general as sartorial freak shows. Held every 4 years to select presidential nominees, the Democratic and Republican conventions are gatherings of the party faithful. If it's not exactly democracy at work, then it's at least it's democracy on vivid display, a chance for delegates from Tulsa and Worcester to make themselves heard and seen. After all, unless you're photographed dressed as a chicken or a wall, were you even there? At the very least, you need a rhinestone-studded cowboy hat. Otherwise, you may as well stay home. Perhaps the two major parties can allow their members to deviate from business casual since they control the overwhelming majority of elected offices. A Republican or Democrat in a Dr. Seuss costume isn't going to inadvertently hand the White House to the U.S. Pirate Party. Third parties don't have that luxury. We've been a party for over 50 years, and we've never gotten a single federal candidate elected, said Weir, who describes himself as a punk alternative guy with tattoos and a nose ring. He isn't against personal style, in other words. But when the biggest news out of your convention is a very big guy in a very small thong, your base probably won't grow much. Quote, I think a lot of libertarians are only libertarians because it gives them the mental freedom pass to break rules and be as crazy as they want to be, Weir said. He'd rather the party focus on ideas that could appeal to swaths of Americans, such as abolishing taxation and expanding personal liberties. Quote, we cannot expect to get over 0.5% of the vote for our candidates if we don't get better on our messaging to normies, Weir said. To drive that point home, he posted an image of several prominent libertarians, including economists Murray N. Rothbard and Milton Friedman, and former Congressman Justin Amash in suits and ties. An account affiliated with the Libertarian Party on X appeared to tacitly support Weir's proposal, posting a palette of button-down shirts, quarter zips, khakis, and loafers to guide the choices of convention attendees. Backlash was so fierce that the account deleted its post, which had become an unnecessary distraction, Libertarian National Committee spokesman Brian McWilliams said. Meanwhile, party's officials said they couldn't even consider Weir's proposal on procedural grounds. Quote, one thing about libertarians, if you tell them what to do, they're probably going to do the opposite, said Stephen Nikala, the current chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. A photo on his X profile page shows Nikala in a crisp white shirt, black tie, and fashionable leather jacket. That look, though, isn't for everyone. Quote, libertarian conventions are an opportunity for some people to do a little bit of peacocking, Nikala said. Weir's proposals seem to focus only on men. Quote, gender politics are impossible to ignore here, said Summer Ann Lee, a fashion historian. The proposal imagines the problem of professional dress largely through male bodies. Last week, Weir submitted the amendment again, this time with a more gender-neutral language. The reference to biological males was gone. The proposal went before the party board, which deadlocked in a 5-5 vote. Nikala, who would have been a tie-breaking vote, abstained. As the convention began in earnest on Friday, the issue of how to dress seemed no more resolved than substantive questions on policy. On the convention floors, things seemed to be proceeding as usual. It's a mix, reported Walden, the Illinois official. The worst one is someone was wearing a one-piece swimsuit. Now, I would think that it is a good move to sit in a convention hall. Now, I wouldn't think that is a good move to sit in a convention hall for many hours, but I wasn't the one wearing it, so. The headline immediately above this article reads, Frailty is a hidden cost of weight loss drugs. Doctors warn that GLP-1 can cause rapid and significant muscle loss, by Natasha Dangur. Chanel Robinson achieved exactly what the gold rush of blockbuster weight loss drug promised. She lost nearly 100 pounds, lowered her cholesterol to normal levels, and reined in her polycystic ovary syndrome. Yet, nearly 3 years into her journey on Mounjaro, the 30-year-old from Atlanta, Georgia, is discovering the hidden costs of the slimmed-down life. Robinson experiences muscle fatigue daily, feeling physically weak, frail, and often cold. Robinson said she experiences bursts of sluggishness sporadically during the day and has trouble with basic tasks like opening a jar. It shouldn't be this difficult, she said. GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro, and Zepbound have been a success for public health and the pharmaceutical companies that make them. But for at least some of the 13 million Americans taking them, losing muscle along with the fat is an unexpected downside that isn't broadly discussed or immediately apparent. The drugs can cause rapid and significant loss of lean muscle mass, up to 10%, comparable to a decade or more of aging, according to the analysis published by the American Diabetes Association. The loss of lean tissue is similar to weight loss from dieting, but the magnitude over a short period can lead to frailty, instability, and lack of coordination, doctors and researchers say. Quote, we are curing obesity by encouraging frailty, said Daniel Green, principal research fellow at the University of Western Australia, who contributed to the analysis. Many taking weight loss medications initially lose fat and feel great, but quickly start to feel weak and lethargic, he said. Green's research showed that the rate of muscle loss could be slowed significantly by regular strength workouts. It should say must be taken with resistance training on the box, he said. Diet and exercise. Drug makers say weight loss drugs should be taken only on the advice of a physician and as part of a long-term plan that includes diet and exercise. A spokesperson for Eli Lilly, maker of Zepbound, said Food and Drug Administration guidelines say it should be used with increased physical activity. The spokesperson added, sustainable weight loss is about more than a number on a scale. Both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk said clinical trials showed users did lose some lean muscle tissue, though at far lower rates than fat. Liz Gerbkova, a spokeswoman for Novo Nordisk, said that trials for its drug Wegovy showed changes in muscle mass didn't significantly differ from patients from who took a placebo. Eli Lilly says users lost three times more fat weight than lean tissue. Raina Kingston, 30, from Denver, said her injections of Zepbound left her feeling so tired the following day that she struggled to complete anything other than basic tasks. She said she shifted her dose to a Sunday because Mondays were her least busy day. Her partner would bring her meals in bed. She stopped exercising and said her doctor didn't give her any guidance on strength training or muscle maintenance. Experts say that losing muscle at such a rate can be especially dangerous for those over 50 or with osteoporosis or limited mobility, as it could lead to an increased risk of injury. Loss of muscle mass is detrimental to moving around and quality of life, but it is also not safe, said Katsu Funai, associate professor at the University of Utah. A quick fix. There is also pushback from doctors and regulators against using weight loss drugs as a quick fix to lose a bit of weight. People who take GLP-1s regain weight 4 times faster than those who lose weight through lifestyle interventions, and weight regained is often mostly fat, according to a recent analysis published in the British Medical Journal. The nurse practitioner who prescribed Robinson the medication didn't warn her that resistance training is essential to maintaining muscle mass, Robinson said. She now does Pilates. In the haste to disrupt the obesity epidemic, weight loss has been treated as the singular, undisputed metric of success, which experts say is problematic. Quote, people worship body weight as an outcome measure because it's simple, quick, and inexpensive, said Green. But what matters is fat and muscle mass, which is more expensive to measure as it requires an MRI. Grace Parkin, 34, a property manager from Sheffield, England, has lost 125 pounds after she started taking Mounjaro in 2024. I don't care about my muscle mass as long as I'm a healthy weight, she said. The doctor who prescribed the drug didn't tell her to exercise, though the pharmacy that sold the medication gave her information on exercise and protein intake, she said. She didn't exercise and said she soon felt the side effects, a deathly cold from the inside, likely because of the drug. In response to some of the side effects, drug companies are hoping to develop weight loss treatments aimed at preserving or even building lean muscle mass. German drug maker Boehringer Ingelheim recently said it had promising results from one such drug. Eli Lilly last September halted a trial of a similar drug. Risks for women. While weight loss medications are designed as lifelong treatments for chronic diseases, namely obesity and type 2 diabetes, they are increasingly marketed as lifestyle fixes. Women may be particularly vulnerable to the drug's side effects, which can also include nausea, diarrhea, migraines, and rarer cases of pancreatitis. A study last year from a university hospital in Turin, Italy, showed women are more prone to adverse reactions to weight loss drugs than men, including muscle loss. Green, the researcher, said the issue is of particular concern to those taking GLP-1s recreationally and who don't have much muscle mass to begin with. Others say a lack of oversight is compounding the issue. An analysis by the FDA from 2023 found that more than half of new Ozempic and Mounjaro users didn't have type 2 diabetes. Scientists are calling for more clinical trials to pin down the full effects of muscle loss in different demographics. Quote, The only studies that have been done have looked at people living with obesity or type 2 diabetes, said Green. That makes it all the more concerning for those using weight loss drugs in an ad hoc or unregistered way. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Under the U.S. News banner on the second page of today's front section, the headline reads, "Some Housing Markets Get More Affordable," by Veronica Dagger. Denver and Honolulu are becoming more accessible to the average homebuyer, some of the few bright spots in a still forbidding housing market. Although more homes have gone up for sale across the country over the past few years, the post-pandemic surge in prices means these listings are often priced too high for local buyers to be able to afford them on their incomes, according to a May report tracking data through March by the National Association of Realtors and Realtor.com. The misalignment between what's for sale and what buyers can afford is especially stark in places like Los Angeles and New York. But there are some expectations, particularly in places where listing prices have flatlined or declined, while incomes have continued to rise. In 19 of the 100 largest metropolitan areas, the alignment between listing prices and incomes has gotten better than it was even before the pandemic. In New Orleans and Houston, the greater inventory has kept a lid on prices. In San Diego and San Jose, California, affordability strains that preceded the pandemic have let up incrementally. Nationwide inventory is finally climbing back from the recent lows, with a steady influx of new properties hitting the market as the severe seller gridlock of the past few years begins to ease. For years, housing analysts have referenced more homes for sale as a key to making the market more affordable. But there's a catch. When the homes are as expensive as they have been, many people can't afford them. This inventory mismatch hits families earning around $75,000 especially hard. While these households can afford a house up to $261,140, homes in that price range make up just 23% of listings nationwide, according to the report. Quote, "Despite modest income gains in recent years, many middle-income buyers still struggle to find homes within their budget, particularly at the entry level where inventory remains tight and competition stays fierce," said Hannah Jones, senior economist at Realtor.com, which is operated out of by News Corp, the parent of the Wall Street Journal. The misalignment generally has been easing since 2023 as home price growth slows, mortgage rates plateau, and incomes keep rising. But the market is still more misaligned than before the pandemic, according to the study by NAR and Realtor.com. Denver and Honolulu are among the outliers. Following a pandemic-era supply crunch, Denver has seen significant increase in new inventory. The added supply has helped cool home prices, which combined with steady local wage growth has meaningfully improved affordability, said Jones at Realtor.com. Altogether, the alignment is better than it was before the pandemic boom. Yet many of these improving markets are hardly affordable. Buyers in cities like San Diego still face a daunting challenge, even if it isn't quite as hard as it was in 2019. Moving on to the shorter side column articles on this page. The first one reads, "Consumer Confidence Slips." Consumer confidence edged downward in May as the inflationary effects of the war in the Middle East intensified, a monthly survey from the Conference Board said. The research group said Tuesday its consumer confidence index fell to 93.1 in May, from an upwardly revised 93.8 in April. Economists polled by the Wall Street Journal had expected a reading of 92. Among age groups, confidence ticked up for consumers aged 35 to 54, but trended downward for older and younger consumers. Consumers' assessment of business and labor market conditions retreated by 3.2 points to 121.2 in May. The expectations index, based on short-term outlook for income, business, and labor market conditions, rose by 1 point to 74.4. The Conference Board said perceptions of employment conditions declined slightly, with the labor market differential, the share of consumers saying jobs are plentiful minus the share saying jobs are hard to get, ticking down by 0.6 percentage point to 6.9. Economists watch this labor market differential to gauge how tight labor conditions are for households. The Conference Board's data comes after a separate survey of consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan reported in May that consumers' mood fell to a record low as perceptions of future inflation worsened amid higher gasoline prices since President Trump's initial attack of Iran in late February. Rise in home prices slows. U.S. home price growth slowed slightly in March as higher mortgage rates intensified the affordability squeeze among homeowners. The S&P Totality Case-Shiller National Home Price Index, which measures home prices across the country, rose 0.7% in the 12 months through March, compared with 0.8% increase in February. For the 10th consecutive month, inflation outpaced national home price appreciation, the survey said. Chicago reported the highest annual gain among the 20 cities with a 6.1% increase in March, followed by New York and Cleveland with annual increases of 4% and 3% respectively. Seattle posted the lowest return in March, falling 2.5%. Quote, the 30-year fixed rate dipped below 6% in late February, but rebounded to roughly 6.4% by the end of March, re-intensifying the affordability squeeze on buyers and potentially further damping home sales and price growth, said Nicholas Godek at S&P Dow Jones Indices. A headline on page 3 reads, What to Know About the New Green Card Policy by Michelle Hackman. Dateline is Washington. The Trump administration announced a new green card policy Friday that, if carried out as intended, would force most applicants for permanent residency to leave the U.S. and apply from abroad. What is the goal? Forcing most green card seekers to apply from outside the country has long been a top policy goal for immigration restrictionists, including many now in the Trump administration. Forcing people to apply from abroad rather than from the U.S., where many temporary visa holders have already made lives, would likely reduce the overall number of green cards issued, making appointments at U.S. consulates can routinely take months or even years to secure, meaning prospective applicants face prolonged time away from their U.S.-based jobs or family. Consular officials abroad may have more latitude to deny cases because foreigners who aren't physically in the country have essentially no right to appeal or sue over their denials. In addition, immigrants who have ever been in the country illegally or who have had gaps between visas because of processing delays could face particular hurdles. Right now, people in the U.S. illegally can still successfully be granted permanent residence if they marry U.S. citizens or have adult citizen children who can sponsor them. But if immigrants who were present in the U.S. unlawfully leave, they could face anywhere from a 3-year to a lifetime ban on returning, putting a green card out of reach. Who is affected? It's murky. In its initial announcement, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said it would only grant adjustment of status, the formal name for granting a green card inside the country, in extraordinary circumstances. But the policy memo the agency sent its individual adjudicators took a much more nuanced stance. It directs officials to weigh many factors, such as the economic benefit of keeping applicants in the country or the burden forcing them to leave would place on families in deciding whether a case would be approved inside the country or sent abroad to a consulate. Quote, it does not intend to have adjudicators be more judicious in whether or not to have someone adjust their status from within the U.S., said Eddie Raleigh, a partner at immigration law firm Fragomen. He said the USCIS memo reads more as a suggestion to exercise more caution in approving cases than creating an entirely new bar applicants must clear. In interviews, Lawyers said that applicants applying for employment-based green cards, most of whom are already working for U.S. companies on temporary visas such as H-1B or 01, will have an easier time demonstrating that they should be allowed to remain in the country while their green cards are being processed. Those who are applying for family-based green cards, such as spouses of U.S. citizens, may have a tougher time, the lawyer said, and applicants might struggle if they have any criminal history, even minor, or gaps in their work authorization. Under the World News banner in today's front section, three headlines. One from Belgium: train bus collide, leaving 4 dead. A train traveling at high speed hit a minibus at a rail crossing in Belgium on Tuesday, killing 4 people, including 2 children, and badly injured 5 other children. It appeared that the minibus drove through the closed crossing barrier, officials said. A security camera showed the bus, carrying 9 people, was moving when the train hit it. The collision happened during morning rush hour near Buggenhout, about 20 miles northwest of Brussels. The bus driver and an escort were killed, along with 2 children aged 12 and 15, said Lisa de Wilde, spokeswoman for the East Flanders Public Prosecutor's Office. Europe. Early heat wave shatters records. The UK smashed a century-old temperature record for the second time in 24 hours on Tuesday, as a spring heat wave continued to scorch parts of Western Europe, triggering government warnings about risks to life. Several drownings were reported in Britain and France as people tried to cool down. A temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded at London's Kew Gardens and Heathrow Airport, Britain's Met Office Weather Service said, breaking the 94.6 degree record set a day earlier at Kew. Records also fell in France, where temperatures reached 97 degrees on Monday. Lebanon. Israel-Hezbollah clash along river. Israel's military clashed with the Iran-backed militant Hezbollah group on Tuesday along a strategic river in southern Lebanon as Israeli troops pushed farther north, days ahead of talks in Washington between Lebanese and Israeli delegations. A U.S.-brokered ceasefire in the Israel-Hezbollah conflict appeared more nominal by the day, complicating efforts at a broader peace in the Iran war, as Tehran wants agreement to include an end to the fighting in Lebanon. The Litani River has been a de facto boundary in Lebanon, with large areas to the south under Israeli military control, despite the ceasefire. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wednesday, May 27, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. and Friday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been David Frothingham. Thank you for listening.